talking to Dani Ayers, who is my personal friend, but also the CEO of Metoo International. Dani is a organization builder. She is like a kid with Tinker Toys building things from the ground up. And she's a master at it, which is why she was the first person I thought of when it was time to turn Metoo into an organization. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about what Metoo is, what her job is, and what this work is like. Dani?
Thanks for having me.
Of course.
I'm happy to be here at your table.
So I know you, obviously, and I know how dope you are, and I know it's hard for you to talk about how dope you are, but if you could just wrap your dopeness into a sticky note size.
You know I love sticky notes.
Yes, I know you love sticky notes. If you could put how dope you are on a sticky note, what would you say about your background?
Yeah, I mean, I build organizations and I love thinking about what it takes to make a sustainable, strong infrastructure and essentially to like serve a particular mission and really like bring alive the work to interrupt inside of social justice spaces. So I've been doing that for 17 years, sort of working in different roles inside of organizations, trying to figure out like what does it really take to make an organization succeed. So many fail on a regular basis. And I feel like I sort of now have the building blocks on sort of what it takes to make a successful organization. So I was so excited when you asked me to join you.
Let's tell that story. So Dani and I worked together in another organization. I met you in Philadelphia in 2009 or 8 or something like that. And we worked together for 4 or 5 years. We were work wives.
Yes, very much so.
Very much so. Lives, work and personal lives intertwined. I love Dani so much. And then she moved to Atlanta and left me. And you know, had a very successful career building organizations, and then Metoo went viral. And we had not really talked a lot. We had been, you know, life was just moving really fast. And I had no intention of starting an organization. Like, it was just the last thing I wanted to do. I've been in nonprofit my whole life. But once it became clear that that was really the only thing I could do to kind of create a container for the vision, we were with some friends, some mutual friends of ours, and all of us, the idea came up, was like, well, how are you gonna make an organization? And somebody said, do you think Dani would do it? And you had just started another job.
I wasn't long into that role, yeah. And I've been consulting for 4 or 5 years and really was sort of in a good place inside of that work. So I was beyond surprised when I got a text from you. It was midnight, because I think you were on the West Coast.
I was on the West Coast. Yeah.
I was in Atlanta, and it was late, and I remember exactly where I was laying down, and I was like, this girl, like.
Because the text said, how do you like your job?
Do you like your job? And I was like, oh my goodness, she's got something up her sleeve. I could tell. And I just was like, I just knew that was the beginning of something. That's a statement that starts something.
Yeah. It's been a crazy ride. It's been almost 3 years, which feels weird to even say. It's been almost 4 years since Metoo went viral, 3 years since we built the organization. And we've learned so much together in these last 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an amazing experience, an incredibly unique one to have such a visible piece of work.
Yeah.
The Metoo movement is so well known, and you know, and to be building a new organization to support that infrastructure is highly unique and challenging.
Oh yeah. One of the things we talked about when you first came on is that part of the reason why we needed an organization is because we needed the world to differentiate #MeToo from the Metoo movement. And we were having a really hard time, and I still think it's a challenge, for people to separate those two things in their mind, because they are often conflated, which is what makes sense, right? Because the media has just painted it all with one brush.
Right.
And so one of our biggest challenges has been to say to people, the hashtag is, it's a tool. It's a galvanizing tool. It's a tool that we use to raise awareness, to get people to understand and pay attention to sexual violence. But the movement holds the work.
Right. The hashtag is a community.
Yes.
And yeah, the movement and differentiating those things is incredibly important.
Mm-hmm.
But because Me Too also went viral in a moment where there was a Hollywood reckoning, you also had the conflation of that.
Right.
That was happening, and this work, bringing this work inside of an organization sort of into the world.
Yeah, that's been, I think one of the things we hear the most is about Hollywood and how Hollywood is connected and how Hollywood is taken up, and almost 0% of our work has to do with Hollywood. I can't say zero, probably there's still a percentage of it that has to do with what goes on in the mainstream media and that impacts us. But what do you think has been, besides that, one of our biggest challenges, or one of which you've seen as the biggest challenge, like as CEO?
Oh, I mean, it's definitely the misunderstanding, and sometimes, frankly, the commitment to misunderstanding.
Yes, willful.
Yes. That we are about taking down powerful men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That we are about, helping really high-level influencer white women seek justice. And folks really do tend to miss the history of the work. And so I think that's been our biggest challenge over the last 3 years. And I think that I was thinking about this the other day, I think we have made some real progress inside of folks understanding the movement. Now when I see people talk about Me Too, they will say this work is about Black women and girls first.
Yeah.
That's new.
That's very new. That's probably in the last 2 years new. In our first year, it was definitely not that way. I remember when we first got together and we started pulling the staff together, the very first thing we wanted to do was the HBCU tour. And people kept saying, why HBCUs? What are you doing? Right?
Yeah.
You should be doing this, you should be doing that. And I was like, we need to go to Black colleges. They have Sexual Assault Awareness Month. It's huge on white college campuses across the country. Black college students aren't talking about it, but Black college students are experiencing sexual violence.
Right.
Nobody understood. And I think that's also another thing we run into. Nobody really understands how we move because we have such big visibility, and they think we should be making Me Too the movie, or or some other. We should be moving in some other way, and we consistently move in the way. We move at the speed of survivors, at the need of survivors, and so. From the Survivor Summit to the Survivors Agenda to our webinars, it's all been in service of what survivors have told us that they need.
And the most under-resourced of survivors.
Exactly.
Right? That's where we start.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely in support of all survivors, but we center the most under-resourced, understanding that if we reach and serve those folks, then everybody gets served.
It's so simple. I mean, obviously you and I know because we're in this every day, but it's so simple. And you're right, people are committed to not understanding, but it's also because people are committed to not making this issue a priority. So if they can find issue with the work, then that puts them further and further away from the actual thing that they should be thinking about, right? If they can take issue and say, well, you're just trying to take down powerful men, or you're trying to attack Black men, which is the other thing we get hit with. In some ways, I want there to be like a troll convention. I just want all of y'all to get in a room together, and it's like that Spider-Man meme where everybody's pointing to each other. Yeah. When Trump was in office, we had all these white men and white women too, just people who supported him saying, you all are, this is cancel culture, and you're trying to take our sons and take down these powerful men. And then we have Black men who are who cared nothing about Me Too when it was Weinstein and Charlie Rose and da-da-da-da-da. As soon as we started talking about R. Kelly, this was, what?
Right.
Why us? Why are you talking about us? And I was like, does R. Kelly represent y'all?
Right. Why are you talking about the Black community? Right. Stay over there.
Stay over there. But that's, again, because, we have a complicated history with sexual violence, but people don't want to deal with the issue.
Yeah.
So let's take aim at the people talking about the issue. Let's take aim at how you frame the issue. Let's take aim at everything except for the fact that the Black community is ravaged by sexual violence.
Right.
And we're not alone. But we don't want to talk about that. It's much easier to say this is a conspiracy to take down, right? Than it is to say, man, what's happening?
And an invitation, right? That it is an invitation. I truly believe we want Black men at the table.
Man, if I could say anything, I'm always talking about, first of all, I do think the mistake that has been made in the last 4 years since Me Too went viral is that men have been framed, and this is not just by people outside the movement, I think people inside of the movement too. Men have been largely framed as people who cause harm, and that's it, right? And so there's this narrative that if men could change, this all would change. That's not true.
Right.
Patriarchy is a motherfucker, right? And it's a motherfucker that we all got to deal with. We were all raised in it. We were all been socialized in it, and we all have to do the work to dismantle patriarchy. And so that men not causing harm is not going to stop sexual violence. Right. It's not going to end rape culture. So engaging men only from a place of like you're toxic, you're would obviously alienate people or push them away. They don't feel like they're a part of the movement. We don't engage men as survivors. Right. We don't even engage men as allies, right? In a lot of ways. So I think that's a shortfalling on our part. But on the flip side, in the Black community, and that's, our work starts in Black and brown communities, there hasn't been space made for the conversation because people want to fight about where we start and what we're talking about. Right. And that part makes it difficult to even, I want to so bad, like pull the curtain and say, y'all just gather around,
Yeah. And there's a role for everybody.
Yes.
And frankly, we're not going to interrupt and end sexual violence without everybody at the table.
No, it's not possible.
And I think that what we keep doing, as we're continuing to grow and develop and work inside the movement is trying to find the way to reach folks, for them to understand that to be in the conversation shouldn't be scary to you. So many people hear Me Too, and it's like,
I'm good. I don't want no part of that. I hear particularly men who will be like, oh, I would never. I'm not that Me Too thing. That's not me. I would never. And I'm like, here's the reality. All of us are complicit in some way, whether it's an upholding rape culture, whether it's with a tenuous relationship with consent, whether it's the way that we heap shame on people who are survivors or who are trying to come forth with their stories. All of us have some level of complicity. And we need to sit with that and understand that and not run from it. Because if we can confront the complicity, then we can unpack it and talk about how we change and shift that. The world, this is not a Black problem, right? The world really has not dealt with sexual violence and how pervasive it is. And so if we don't confront the breadth and depth of sexual violence, then we can't really get to answers. But people are so busy being like, no, not that, not me, not ever. And I'm like, oh yes.
Right.
Oh yes.
And it also doesn't mean you are condemned.
No.
Right? And that you are no longer someone who has redeeming qualities. Like, I think folks are so terrified of this cancel culture idea that they aren't willing to have some courage about being able to step into the things that we know have been embedded in us as a manifestation of patriarchy, right?
Again, that's another reason why I try to explain to people. I think what happened when Me Too went viral, particularly for women, and I'm obviously not speaking for all women in any way, but I think for a lot of women and a lot of people who experience sexual violence that have been silenced, you're like, wait, it's safe? I can say this out loud? And we were like, right? It was just a flood of people coming forward and saying, there was that time in 3rd grade when that person touched me. It was that time in high school. It was that man who I worked with. And it's like you have this recounting. So there was that. It was the release. Right. And for some people, it was like, oh my gosh, this is so much. This is too much. But it's real. Yeah. So there's that kind of phase of it. I feel like 4 years in, we're almost at 4 years, it's leveling off a little bit. where you shouldn't have to be scared of the conversation. We should be able to have a reasonable conversation that says, yes. This is what I was saying when Biden was running for office.
Yeah.
The thing that irritated me is that they wanted so badly to just not talk at all about his flaws and his shortfallings around this. And I'm not talking about the breath, because accusations ran the gamut, but they were clear. We had videotape, right, of him touching people inappropriately, making women uncomfortable. That's not sexual assault, but it is a imbalance of power. There are some things that are problematic about that. And if I am, as a human being, saying, I don't want you to touch me that way without my permission, I should be allowed to say that. But you, in turn, should be able to say, oh, wow, I didn't realize that I violated your space.
Right.
I just want to understand how I made you feel unsafe so that I don't do it again. I'm speaking to your point about courage. There's not enough courage to do that.
Yeah.
Because what people feel like is that they even have a little bit of admission, a little bit of courage, people are going to say, see, get them out of here.
Right.
And I think there's some truth to that on the other side, right? There's no nuance. So where's the space to hear people say, I realize, and I'm looking at this situation, that I have a slippery relationship with consent. I didn't really understand how that was a violation. I get it now, and I want to do better. Mm-hmm. Us as an organization, right? Me Too, the organization, Me Too, the movement, the work, we embrace that. But we get conflated and lumped in with the people who don't.
Right.
We get conflated and lumped in with the people who are not listening. And so it just makes the work kind of an uphill battle. But to your point, I do think that we've made some headway in being repetitive and saying this over and over again.
Yeah, and I think part of the learning for us is that we know this stuff, right? Like, we know this intimately. There are so many people who do not. And so, you know, when I said about figuring out new ways to sort of talk about this, like, I love that, you know, April being Sexual Assault Awareness Month, that this month we're talking about rape culture.
Yeah.
And we're using it as like an education to really share, like, what is this really about?
Yeah.
Like, actually, yeah, when somebody's catcalling you on the street, that's an example.
Exactly.
Right? And it's like opening people's eyes in a different way, because it's not black and white, right?
It's not. And it's also incremental. We have to take it step by step. Talking about disrupting rape culture and using this month to do that is really powerful, because I think people need to, if you take it all the way to the beginning and we say that sexual violence happens on a spectrum, you have to understand what undergirds that spectrum.
Right.
Right? So no, you may not be a rapist, sir. You may not be a person who would sexually assault somebody, madam. But if you are somebody who upholds this culture, then you create the space for that violence to happen. Right? If you're the person that listens to the rape jokes and laughs, if you're the person that watches, if you're the bystander and watches the harassment happen and you don't intervene, then you are giving the person who would do the thing that you wouldn't do permission. You're giving them space to do that. Mm-hmm. So what the everyday person can do is work to dismantle that culture so that the other things don't happen. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not just about being the person who causes harm. Is a big place to live. Right?
Yeah.
It's a lot of ways that you can cause harm. And so I love that that's part of our work too, is that we have to shift the narrative that people think of sexual violence as such an individual thing. This person assaulted that person, it's between the two of them.
Yeah.
That's not how it works. That's not what collective responsibility looks like.
Talk about the comparison. I use this all the time. You talk about the perception that sexual violence is an individual act and the response that you
like violence versus it is absolutely.
It's such a good comparison.
Yeah, I think that if we could look at the way we respond to gun violence in our community versus the way we respond to sexual violence, people would understand this differently. When somebody is shot, particularly a child, if a child is shot in our community, people rally around, right? You get matching t-shirts, You're gonna have a community meeting. People are gonna say, we have to stop the violence in this community. We cannot have children dying in the street. Even if it's police violence, right? We're gonna rally around, we're gonna say, we have to end this violence in our community. People respond to gun violence because one, it's so tragic. You see the evidence of that tragedy in front of you, but also it feels connected to your personal safety.
Right.
You don't want your child to be shot. You don't want to be shot. So it feels like something that we have to work on collectively. Mm-hmm. When there is sexual violence in the community, the response is the opposite. You say, be quiet. We don't know what really happened.
Right.
We don't have all the details. Right. We don't want to ruin that person's reputation. We don't know the whole story.
That's not our business.
It's not our business, right? And it becomes, then it's an indictment of the person. Well, you know what they said about her. Mm-hmm. You know? So there's all these various ways that we make excuses, and we don't feel connected to that person's safety. But we also don't understand that it's a different kind of death. We see a body in the street, we see bullets, we see blood, and we get that, we connect to that. We say that person has lost their life. We see a child that's been molested, and we don't get that person has effectively lost their life. Mm-hmm. But the difference is, we as a community can pour into this person to give them back their life.
Right.
But we abandon them, right? We don't feel responsible for that life.
Right.
But we will spend all our time trying to redeem this life. And we should, both of them are valuable.
Right.
But our job is to try to pour into the life that we can actually give life to again. Mm-hmm. So that's why the narrative work is important, for people to understand what sexual violence feels like, right? To connect to that, to see the before and after, to look at the breadth, we've been talking a lot about I May Destroy You, the HBO series that Michaela Cole wrote and stars in. Right. I love it so much because she really gets into the heart of what survival looks like, right? And takes you through all of the different places that it goes and can go. And I think that we need more stories like that. We need more narrative like that so people understand what this feels like and connects to it in a different way, so that you get why we need to rally around the person who experiences violence in your community, and why your safety should be connected to their safety. And not just because you care about that individual, but you care about your community. Right? This is what community safety looks like. And it's not just getting the guns off the street or getting the gangs out of the street. It's what does safety look like to every single individual in that community.
Yeah, and I think the thing that in all of the work that we do with so many organizations who are working to interrupt sexual violence, one of the things that continues to come up in our conversations is our positionality around healing. Mm-hmm. It's becoming more of the conversation, but it has not been. No. And I think when you talk about I May Destroy You, the humanity of experiencing sexual violence and the after part. Yeah. And there's just a raw, realness to the experience. And I think the thing that from the beginning I felt so connected to about this work is that, it's this coin, it's the healing and advocacy. Mm-hmm. We spend so much time thinking and talking and working around the healing. Yeah. And that's unique.
It is. That's the reason why I felt like the organization was needed. It was, like you said, there are so many really great organizations. We've worked with a lot of them. Yeah. That do this work. A lot of them are committed to action. They're committed to advocacy, and we need that. They want to change laws. They want to, provide direct service to survivors and things like that. What I thought was missing in the field was an organization that had big visibility and big reach, that was talking about healing and bringing the idea around healing and that survivors deserve healing into bigger spaces, into bigger and broader conversations. And I just wasn't seeing it. And you've seen it, right? You've been in this job now. You see that we always have to be like, well, what about this part? Because yes, prevention is absolutely necessary, and we're working on that every day. But the fact is, when Me Too went viral, it went viral because 12 million people used the hashtag in 24 hours. Right. I think every day about what do we owe them?
Yeah.
What do we owe the people who have already experienced this violence? If we say we are committed to this work, we have to have something for them. There has to be an offering besides tell me your story.
Right.
You know? Tell me why I should feel empathy for you, why I should do this work, why I should change this law. Cut and bleed more for me in order for me to do something for you. That's not how that should work.
We continue to be so surprised by the risk, like the people that come to our survivor healing work.
Yeah.
It just continues to surprise us.
Mm-hmm.
And it just is a constant reminder of how much this is needed.
Yeah.
I mean, our survivor healing series, we
wanted 500 or something like that.
We were like, it's a pandemic. We know that so many, intimate partner violence is on the rise, child sexual abuse is on the rise, all of these things. And what can we do in that moment? And we said, well, we want to have this healing series that's for survivors in this moment, wherever they are. And thought, if we get 500 at each of these, that would be amazing. That would have been success.
Yeah.
And have meant something. We didn't have less than 1,200 people at each.
And we had 7?
We had 8.
It was 8.
You are 8.
Oh, I was the 8th one.
Yeah. I mean, it's so much so that now that's going to be part of our core programming each year. Because there's and what you see in the chats, what you see from folks is why they need
yes,
this.
it's a need for connection. I'm telling you, at a point when it was just grassroots Tarana, in the community Tarana, just trying to figure out how we do something. What felt insurmountable is how can I take this idea that we can empower people with empathy and really spread it? Because I watched it happen. I watched it and I saw what people needed. I wanted to do work to end sexual violence for sure. But it felt unethical to ask people to come to this meeting so we can talk about ending this abuse, knowing that you were coming to this in pain. Like one of my favorite quotes is from Joanne Smith from GNC. Joanne Smith from Girls for Gender Equity.
Yeah.
She says, "We come to the work because we are the work." And I think it's such a beautiful quote because it's so, so true.
Yeah.
But if we know that that's true, then we have to prepare for that. We have to operate as if the people who are coming to the work are coming because they are the work, right? And if we are not offering healing, then why are we doing this?
Right.
It just doesn't make sense to me.
And when we sought out, for our programming, understanding that before we could get to the interruption of sexual violence, the advocacy and action, we have to address the healing. We have to address the impact on lives and how people are showing up.
Yeah.
And we had to create all new curriculum. We had to spend so much time thinking about that. And it means that everything takes longer.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Even the work, I think about our HBCU fellowships that we have right now. We have all of this organizing we want to do on HBCU campuses to make them safer.
But you got to take care of babies first.
And it's an eye-opening experience to see how much healing is needed.
But it also, part of our work has become normalizing the idea that healing is also movement work.
Yeah.
Right? So many people also want to jump in and be like, I want to come in and I want to be a part of the movement. And we recognize right away, you need more work on yourself. You don't need to be a spokesperson. You don't need to be out in the front. You don't need to share your story to change somebody else's life. You need to work on your life. But some part of the way the world works now with social media and all of this visibility, people feel like they're not validated if their story is not being told in the big, big way. If people aren't liking and sharing and all the rest of that. Or they have to be in the movement and that means something to them. And I get it. But it also, to be in this movement is to work on yourself.
Right.
To prioritize your healing journey. And we really have to normalize the idea that healing work is movement work, right? We want to, you don't have to be protesting, marching, volunteering, train. You don't have to do any of that to be a part of Metoo or anything else. We want you to be well. And that is a part of this movement. And if people would get that, I think we'd have more people prioritizing their own journey than trying to be out in the forefront speaking and being activists or whatever else they want to, they're trying to do.
Yeah. I think that's the ongoing conversation. We live in a society that really does value fame and visibility and blue checks and, you know, all of that. And I think that it is our continuous work to like speak that message and make sure that people understand. We want them to be, you know, solving for their own freedom from, you know, the healing journey is one that meanders and, you know,
forever.
Yes. And so you can't ever you're never going to reach sort of the end of it and then be like, okay, now I'm ready to act.
Yeah.
It's a process.
Yeah. So many people want to be involved, and I think it's amazing. And I think that in your own time, you'll know when you've done enough work to kind of transition and add some more to the work you have to do. And then there are people who have never experienced sexual violence but are so moved by what they see, and they see the stuff in the media and they see stuff on social media, and they're like, what can I do? I just want to be a part of this. And that's also been something we've tried to solve for, because everybody can't volunteer. Again, everybody can't march and protest and do those kind of things. And we've had some really amazing experiences over the last few years, and I think probably one of the best ones has been collaboration with FCB to create our Act 2 platform.
Yeah, I think that, you know, answering the question that you constantly get when you're speaking around, well, what can I do? I work at a bank. I work at a grocery store. I get this as an issue, but what can I do? And partnering with FCB on solving for this has been it's just a beautiful adventure to have a global ad firm, first of all, say to you, we want to do this with you. We want to solve for that question and put all of their juice behind it, and, you know, more than $1 million in in-kind to make this happen, and ultimately create a platform that is the world's first recommendation engine for activism. Act 2 is genius.
It is. It really is. I remember when we were first ideating around it, and I was like, I need a way for people to know what's happening in their community. I need a way for people to understand that they can get involved, big ways and small ways. And they were kind of like, you know, like, they can't remember. We had the dots, the pink dots.
Yeah, it was the dots first.
The geolocation, and then they came back with the
blockchain was, first of all, when they first presented blockchain to us, we're like,
is that cryptocurrency or something like
that? That's in the finance space. Like, what does that have to do with social justice? And that was their point. They're like, no, this is it. Yeah. And it took us a moment to come around to really understanding it and really valuing it in the way that they did. But we really, it makes this project cemented. You know, that every action that's taken on the Act 2 platform is written into a permanent digital ledger.
Forever.
Of all of these actions that are taking place, more than 1,000 that exist on the site, and you can actually submit actions.
Yeah. No, I think my real hope for this is that it is replicated. Like, we have this Act 2 for sexual violence, and people can go on the site and they can figure out where to volunteer, where to donate, where to get training, but they can also do micro actions and figure out, how do I learn more? Right? It's like the thing we were talking about earlier about understanding what survival looks like. What podcast can I listen to? What book can I read? What article should I know about? There's all ways, big and small, that can happen in any area of social justice. And it would be amazing to see the ways that, again, look at how sexual violence and gun violence intersect. Sexual violence and police violence intersect, right? There are all these intersections that happen. And I think Act 2 is an amazing platform to make those two, to make that really visible for people. And you may be passionate about this thing and this thing, and they can both come together in this one place.
I just, you know, would be remiss if I didn't mention the part of the, you know, talk about intersectionality, and Act 2 really is visibilized a lot of the ways that we see the intersections of structural racism and sexual violence. And like, that's another way in which, you know, we have, you know, during the reckoning of the uprising in the last couple of years, or the last year or so, we know how much sexual violence intersects with structural racism. That's something that, you know, we are clear on.
Very.
we're always trying
to make other people clear.
Yes. You know? And I just think it's important to note, like, we're a Black-led organization.
That's right.
We center Black women and girls.
Yeah.
And we're yet still trying to help the world understand that these issues are completely intertwined. Solving for one is solving for the other.
That's right.
And
it's what you said earlier. If we can solve for this group, it reverberates out to everybody. We can, and this is why I love the fact that I was raised by and trained by Black feminists, because what that taught me is that you start with the least of these to make sure that everybody gets served, but everybody will get served.
Yeah.
Right? And I will make sure my folks don't get left out, because if I wait for y'all to trickle down, then I'm only gonna get crumbs from my people, and that's not acceptable.
No. Well, this has been amazing.
This has been amazing.
Thanks for having me at your marble table.
Always with you, Dani.
Of course.
Always practice. Anyway, thank you for being my first guest.
You're welcome. I feel very honored, by the way.
Oh, good.
Very.
Well, you should be, because I love you so much. Oh, we should talk about where Metoo is.
Oh. So yes, if you want to learn more about the Metoo movement, about the work of Metoo, you should visit metoomovement.org.
MVMT.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then also the Act 2 platform is at act2.metoomovement, also mvmt.org. You can literally go there to take action right now, anytime. It's available globally as well.
Ooh, nice.
So
and our social media channels are Metoo Movement on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter. Metoo MVMT.
Perfect.